This prison has a strange rule. Hundreds of Michelin dishes must be prepared for the inmates every day. The warden was even more strict about the food, because there was a hair on the pastry. He called in all the chefs to compare, but even with all that food, couldn't prevent cannibalism. It turned out to be a vertical prison with no bottom. There were 2 inmates on each floor. The food was distributed from the top to the bottom through the dining tables. Because the upper floors waste food recklessly, the lower floors are constantly starving. Without food, the inmates become extremely violent. But once a month, they were given the chance to change floors. Whether you get a good floor or not is a matter of luck. The hero, Grim, has just been assigned to the 48th floor. His roommate, White, told him. He told him he was lucky to be assigned to this floor. After saying that, White grabbed a pillow and knelt down on the floor. As the green light came on, a hovering dining table fell to the 48th floor. Although 94 people have already eaten, but Oldby did not care a bit. He grabbed the food and ate it. Seeing these leftovers, Green has no appetite at all. To prevent him from starving when he first arrived, eventually he grabbed what looked like a whole apple and headed down to the lower level. But then the white man threw an empty bottle down and then spat on it. Green didn't understand why he was doing this. The white man responded, "They're going to eat it anyway, and that's what the people up there are doing." At that moment, the temperature in the room suddenly rises. The white man warns Grim, "It's going to get hotter until they're burned to a crisp. Unless you throw that apple away. There's only 2 ways to die in this place. Either you die from the heat or you freeze to death." After hearing that, Grim immediately threw away the apple. Soon the temperature in the room returned to normal. The next day, the table still stopped at the appointed time, and today's food was still a mess. As usual, the white man knelt at the table and devoured the food. He taunted the Grim that he didn't deserve to be on this floor. He won't eat a bite of this good food. Grim quickly changed the subject. He asked him how many floors there were in this prison, but he didn't know. The lowest floor he'd been to was 132. There's nothing left to eat down there, and it looks very deep down there. Green was puzzled. How could he survive until now? Until he saw the knife that Oldby pulled out. Green realized everything. It seems that this prison is darker than expected. He tried to communicate with the upper and lower classes, but no one paid any attention. He was even insulted and taunted. Unable to stand it, the old white man unzipped his pants. He gave the lower class a hot bath. A few more days passed in a flash. The hungry Grim finally couldn't stand it any longer. Kneeled down on the ground like Old White. Although the food was hard to swallow, but it was better than starving to death. That day, a woman suddenly appeared on the dining table. Seeing that she was covered with wounds, Green wanted to help her, but the old white man advised him not to meddle. Every month, the woman comes down from the dining room table to look for her daughter. Before she comes down, she kills her cellmate. That way, she'll be reunited with her daughter next month. As the platform slowly descends, the inmates on the lower level drag the woman down. They were about to do something unspeakable. The righteous Grim screamed, but to no avail. He tried to jump in and save the woman, but the platforms were too far apart. But it didn't take long. The woman stopped screaming. She came back up to the platform, covered in blood. Apparently, the prisoners on the lower level had been killed by her. Time went by. A month had gone by. It was time to reassign the floors. Oldby kept praying. He hoped that he could go to a higher floor. Suddenly a large amount of anesthetic gas appeared in the room. Soon everyone fell into a deep sleep. The next day, when he woke up from his coma, Green found himself tied to the bed, but he couldn't get free. At that moment, Oldby came over with an evil look on his face. "We've been assigned to the 171st floor." Green confirmed the floor. A sense of foreboding arose. Old White knew the rules of survival in prison. He was afraid that Green would try to poison him. That's why he did it first. He gently caressed Green. He could last a week without food. "If there's no food supply, I won't kill him then. The meat will rot and spoil. He'll start with the non-fatal spot. Then he'd bandage it up and cut the next spot. Of course, Oldby won't let Grim starve to death. He'd give him some meat on the way." Then there were screams from above, because they realized they were on a bad floor. Soon the food table came down. White went up and took a look. There wasn't a bone on it. Even the plates were licked clean. And as the days went by, on the 8th day, the old white man couldn't hold out any longer. He walked slowly to Green with a knife and ripped his pants off. As Green's heartbreaking screams were heard, White stabbed the knife into his thigh. At that moment, the woman from before suddenly appeared. Her appearance saved Grim's life. If the previous woman had been abused, Green chose to remain silent. I believe that the woman would not be able to save him. The woman then bandaged his wounds. When Green woke up from unconsciousness again, he found the woman eating the body of the old white man. When Green woke up, the woman cut off a piece of meat and brought it to his mouth. The taste was unbearable, but in order to survive, he had no choice. When Grim had adapted to the environment, the woman took another ride on the dinette to the lower level. The rest of the day, Grim survived on the body of the old white man. When he woke up again, he found that he had been assigned to the 33rd floor. Grim was finally relieved. This time he didn't have to eat human flesh. He then realized that his new cellmate was a woman. Jade is the female prosecutor of this prison. She seemed to recognize Green's confusion. She explained that she was here by choice. Jade was suffering from a dozen terminal illnesses. She wanted to experience prison life for herself at the end of her life. As soon as the words left her mouth, the dining table slowly landed on their floor. Suehua loaded the food onto 2 plates. It was enough to feed her and the dog for a day. Grim hadn't had any decent food for a month. Seeing the abundant food in front of them, and at the sight of all the food in front of him, he ate it all. Suehua told Green, "There are 200 floors in this prison. The cooks make enough food every day. As long as the inmates are evenly distributed, the people on the lower floors won't go hungry at all." As the table descends to the next floor, Jade patiently tells the people below, please eat from the plate in front of you, and when you're done, fill it up again. And then she tells the people on the next floor to do the same. It was obvious that such persuasion was a waste of words. Grim just watched the whole thing. He didn't say anything, because he had done the same thing when he first came here. But under these circumstances, no one cares about other people's lives, as long as they have enough to eat. But Suehua didn't give up. For 2 weeks, the people on the lower floors still didn't listen. They were even abusive. That day, Green finally couldn't stand it any longer. He went up to them in anger, and warned the prisoners on the lower decks, if they didn't listen to him, next time, he'd add feces to the food. After hearing this, the lower level inmates were in a state of panic, and agreed to do as they were told. But Jade was still trying to convince the higher-ups. Obviously, this logic doesn't work. A few days later, the woman reappeared in front of Green, but this time she was seriously injured. Green and Jade rushed her to bed to rest. At night, Green woke up to the sound of an argument. The woman had killed Suewa's dog. The two of them got into a fight, but Green stopped her in time, and the woman, who had eaten and drunk enough, she left on the dining table again. At that moment, Suewa revealed a shocking secret. The woman had no children at all. Grim was puzzled by this. Why did she keep looking for a child? The next day, there was a lot of food on the table, but most of it had been spoiled by the upper class. Grim was just about to eat. He found his favorite escargot. It had been months since he'd eaten his favorite food. Soon it was time to change floors once a month. At night, Grim began to pray, not to go to too low a floor, but when he woke up, he realized he was on the 202nd floor. Then Jade realized. That's when Jade realized she was wrong to think the prison was only 200 floors, and that her idea of uniting everyone was a joke. Even if they did, there wasn't enough food to go around. Desperate, Jade finally chose to end her life. She knew that Green was different from the other prisoners. She didn't choose to jump. She hoped that her body would give Grim a chance to live. After her cellmate left, Grim's schizophrenia struck again. At that moment, he saw Suehua and Old Bai in his mind. They were urging Green to eat meat, so that he can survive. Green was once again in a mental battle. This time, the choice was even more difficult. Old Bai wanted to eat himself, so when he eats him back, I don't feel too guilty. But Suehua, like himself, is also an idealist. Eating her would mean giving up her principles. In the following days, Green insisted on eating books for a while, but in the end, his hunger overcame his reason. In the end, he picked up the knife and went to Suehua. A month passed in a flash. When he woke up again, he found himself on the 6th floor, and this time his cellmate was a black man. He hoped to escape from this place with the rope in his hand. The Negro got down on his knees and prayed. He begged the people above him to pull him up. On the 5th floor was a man and a woman. They agreed to the black man's request, but just as he was about to climb up, a piece of excrement fell on his face. The black man slipped and fell, and only with Green's help did he survive. But the rope fell. He wailed in despair. There was nothing he could do to escape. It was obvious that the people up there were just entertaining him, looking at the table full of food. The Negro had no appetite. At night, Green found the desperate black man. He told him he wanted to change the prison system. As long as every inmate was fed properly, then no one would starve to death. Once the system is broken, maybe all the prisoners will be released. Hearing this plan, the black man's hope was renewed. He took Grim in his arms with excitement. The next day, they took down the beds and jumped on the dining room table, weapons in hand. The first 50 floors were fed every day. They started distributing food from the 51st floor. It was the only way the people below would not starve. Under the threat of violence, most people chose to compromise, but there were some who didn't. In this case, Green didn't show any mercy. He sent him out of this world. During their descent, they met a wise man. The black man had known him before. He trusted him. After learning of their plan, the wise man was very supportive. He instructed them to send a plate of food back to level 0 in one piece. This would attract the attention of the prison administrators, and let them know that the inmates here have not lost their conscience. After listening to the wise man's advice, the two of them realized what they were doing. They chose a plate of panna cotta. They were prepared to risk their lives to protect the food, and then they headed down with the platform. 50 to 100 floors. The inmates were hungry and thirsty, but they still have a shred of humanity left. But when they reached the 100th floor, the inmates were often seen killing each other. Suddenly a familiar scream attracted Green. It was the woman from before. She was about to become someone else's meal. The two of them immediately jumped down to save her. But the two inmates on this floor are extremely fierce. After a life and death struggle, the black man and Green were both seriously injured, and the woman was not breathing. Looking at the woman's cold body, Grim was devastated, because she had saved his life. Finally, the black man forced him onto the dining room table, and they continued down the stairs. After reaching the 200th floor, there was a disgusting smell of blood in the air. The scene in front of us was even worse, and a cell without a living person, and the dining room table wouldn't stay. I don't know how long it took. The table finally stopped moving down, and the number of floors here was 333. Here they miraculously found a little girl. No one knows how she survived. As they were coming down, the table started to descend again. It was pitch black down there. No one knew how deep it went, and then the girl crawled out. She was staring at the jelly in the black man's hand. They were reluctant to part with it, but in the end, they gave in. They watched the girl eat it with gusto. They smiled at each other. In the evening, the dining table was back on the top floor. The girl was asleep in her bed. Green woke up and found the black man dead. Then with his last strength, he carried the girl up to the table. Green held the girl close to him and stroked her head. When he got off the table, subconsciously bumped into the old white man. They walked side by side into the darkness. The girl was sent back. This is the end of the movie. In fact, The girl doesn't exist at all. She's just a figment of Green's imagination, because in the middle of the movie, the plate of parfait is in the hands of the warden. He found a hairline in the custard, and he reprimanded all the cooks. And the prison is 333 floors, and it goes down to the bottom. In fact, there are all kinds of people in life. There's a lot more than 333. In the movie, the inmates get a chance to change their lives every month. But in real life, some people are born with a golden key. Some people work hard all their lives, but they don't have a higher starting point than others. The hierarchy of the dining table is from top to bottom. It's the same in real life. Movies are always crueler than reality.